Hello everyone, welcome to Reading / Debunking the Bible, episode 3. In this episode I will talk about the Garden of Eden, the fall of man, the curse, Cain and Abel, and the descendants of Adam. In this episode the basis for Christianity's views on women will come up, as well as just some other interesting verses I wanted to point out. So let's start with the Garden of Eden. One of the things that has always bothered me is that if the fruit of this tree is not supposed to be eaten, then why is this tree in the middle of the garden? And I quote the Bible, Genesis 2:9, "And out of the ground made the Lord God who grow every tree that is pleasant to the sight and good for food, the tree of life also in the midst of the garden, and the tree of knowledge of good and evil." If man was not allowed to eat from this tree, then why don't put it where he can't reach it? Don't put it in the middle of the garden, where it is a constant temptation. I mean, like this, it's almost as if the system was set up for man to fail. Then the Bible moves on to the naming of animals and the creation of woman. Now Adam gives all the animals their name. This is important because in the culture back when the Bible was written, giving something a name meant you had power or dominion over it. Now with animals this is harmless enough, but this becomes a problem when Adam names the newly created human sex woman. And I quote the Bible, "And Adam said, This is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman because she was taken out of man." Now let's see what some of the Bible scholars have to say about this. One quote from them: "God delegated authority to man since the act of naming the animal shows lordship or dominion." And then another quote, a little bit farther down: "Adam's act of naming his wife reinforces his leadership and authority over her." Now these are some very concerning ways of thought, and it also shows why the Church has such a view on women nowadays and why it oppresses women nowadays. It all links back to these first few chapters of Genesis, where Adam names Eve and therefore he creates or he gets dominion over her. Every church and religion based on the Bible uses this verse, and no doubt some verses to come, as divine permission or even divine command to oppress and lord over women. Christianity doesn't do this as extreme anymore, though it also hasn't disappeared yet and is still a problem. However, in a lot of the Muslim countries, this is still a large problem. And this verse is indeed the first real example, out of many, many still to come, of what evil and injustice religion brings into our world. Evil and injustice that we wouldn't have had if we didn't have religions. The very next verse is a cause for even more sorrow. And I quote, "Therefore shall a man leave his father and his mother, and shall cleave unto his wife, and they shall be one flesh." This verse is used as justification for denying gay couples marriage. And indeed, when we see what the scholars have to say about this, and I quote, "God's ideal plan for marriage is one man for one woman for one lifetime. God's pattern for material happiness is evident when a man loves and leads his family with children who obey and reverence their parents, with a wife who respects and supports her husband's leadership." Unquote. Now, this verse doesn't yet address homophilia directly, which is something I will get into when the Bible actually does show some of its more homophobic sides. But this verse, however, is used to deny gay couples the right to get married, which in my eyes is something really wrong and really morally objective, that you would deny other people the right of happiness that you yourself have. Now we move into one of the more dubious stories of the Garden of Eden, the talking snake. Now even though the scholars mentioned speech as one of the differences or gaps that God put between man and animals, Here we have one that does talk, which is strange enough. But many people see this snake as symbolism for the devil, or the snake was acting in accordance with the devil. However, whichever way you look at it, it raises a hell of a lot of questions. The first question is, who created the devil? This should probably be God, since he created everything, right? So if this is true, then why did God create the devil? What purpose would he possibly have for the devil? 3. How does a God that is supposed to be omnipotent, all-knowing and everywhere at once miss this? How does he not see this? How does he not intervene? And 4. If he was aware of this happening, why doesn't he stop it? It is almost as if God wanted mankind to fail. And on top of that, the whole story is just so obviously and shamelessly made up. I don't know how people can possibly believe it. I can't even understand how people back in that day could possibly believe this garbage. Now that I'm on the topic of all-knowing, why does a God that is all-knowing constantly have to ask what is going on? From the sound of it, he seems rather clueless. The next thing you find in the Bible is the curse. Now, the curse is not that interesting as a whole, although one of the punishments for women is that man shall rule over her, which is yet another verse that is used to oppress women. However, there is one particularly interesting verse in the curse though, and this is Genesis 3:15, and I quote, "And I will put enmity between thee and woman, and between thy seed and her seed. It shall bruise thy head, and thou shalt bruise his heel." This verse is seen as the first mentioning of the Messiah. Most Christians think the prophecy was fulfilled with Jesus. However, this is of course hardly impressive. When you look at the verse, it is extremely vague and could mean a lot of things. If the verse had prophesied Jesus by name with the correct date and some of his actions alongside it, then I would have been impressed by this prophecy. But this vague verse is, in my opinion, proof of absolutely nothing. It doesn't prove Jesus. I mean, it's hardly even a prophecy the way it's written. Then comes the story of Cain and Abel. For this I will just give a quick summary, as it is really not that important and it is just to bridge and explain the gap till Noah. Cain and Abel are the first two sons of Eve. Cain kills Abel because Abel's sacrifice was better received by the Lord. God banishes Cain for his crime. Cain wanders for a while before marrying and building a city. The descendants of Cain that live here are completely godless and commit countless crimes, and this is part of the reason why the flood will be necessary. The next chapter gives the lineage from Adam to Noah, and Noah is a descendant of Adam's third son. The only thing I will mention about this whole part of the story is that all the people in it lived to be around 900 years, which just adds to the list of obviously made up things that make the Bible such a lovable story. This again, people living for over 900 years, it's just incredible how people can actually believe this and actually reason in their mind that this is a true story. So that was it for episode 3. As always, I hope you guys found this interesting. If you did, please leave a like or comment. Next episode will be about Noah and the flood. Thanks for watching.